Chapter 1. Adding points turned it into a little monster. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. In a dim room where the light flickered, strange things filled every corner of the space that measured about a dozen square meters. There was a rabbit with wings locked up in a cage, an orange shaped like a banana, a pretty desk the size of a palm, and a book with a delicate cover that was over 2 meters tall and a meter wide. On the cover of the book was the title, Modern History Essentials of Huaxiao. A young man around 18 or 19 years of age was surrounded by those peculiar items. He was lying down on his study desk as he looked at his smartphone. The screen on his smartphone was showing the page of a questionnaire app titled, How to Earn 1 Million During Your University Years. The young man was scrolling down the page, jotting notes in the notebook beside him. As he was carried away by the contents, his smartphone rang all of a sudden. The page of the questionnaire app turned into the incoming call screen and the caller ID showed Mom. Quickly adjusting his sitting posture, the young man slammed the notebook shut and answered the call. He moved his smartphone to his ear to ask, Mom. What's wrong? Why are you calling me at this hour? On the other side of the call was the plain voice of a woman with a southern accent. Nothing in particular. I'm just calling you to see how you're doing. A little pause later, the woman continued, How have you been doing lately? Did you get into any trouble with the school? How are your studies? No, I didn't get into trouble and my studies are fine. You and Dad don't have to worry about me, answered the young man in a kind voice. The woman answered with an, oh, before she asked, do you have enough to spend? In the last 2 days, your pops and I got some extra grains and sold a bunch. We've been having it a bit easier lately, so why don't I transfer another 300 yuan to you? The young man patiently waited for his mother to finish before he answered, no need for that, Mom. I'm working part-time in between my studies, so it's enough to cover my expenses. Don't worry. You don't need to transfer money to me. Save it or buy yourself some new clothes. L.RG, I'm fine. Your ma has enough to wear. You're the one who should take care of yourself, especially since the expenses in the capital are higher. You'd better not save on food and have some good meals. We still have money to spend back here. The two chatted for almost 10 minutes. Finally, the young man hung the phone up after his mother had voiced all her reminders. After the phone call, the young man looked at his room of strange things and sighed. His name was Su Yang from the Zhejiang province and he was currently a university student in Shanghai. He was from a rural village in the Zhejiang province. All the villagers there were farmers, including his parents, hence their lives were rather dry and meager, and they barely had enough to spend. Su Yang's tuition fees for high school and university alone had almost drained all his family's savings. His parents had to tighten their belts just to save enough money for his daily expenses in the capital. Even though life in Shanghai was rather bitter, Su Yang never told his family about it because he did not want to burden his parents. As a boy who came from a poor family, he was hardworking. During the first semester in his first year, he worked during the weekends, sending flyers and selling stuff. Other than his own daily expenses, he managed to save up to a few $1,000s after all his hard work. At first, things started to improve. Maybe, in the future, Su Yang would be like most of the people who came to Shanghai to make a living. He would get a steady job, have some savings, and maybe buy a house in his hometown. Then, he would get married, have a baby, and spend the rest of his life plainly. However, a month ago, his life changed. He acquired a system. It was quite simple actually. He had to complete the mission provided by the system so that he could get points. These points could be added to anything just like skill points of a game, but the outcome totally depended on luck. For example, he added the points to a rabbit, and the rabbit grew a pair of wings on its back. He added points to an orange and its shape changed into a banana. He added points to a book which became a lot bigger. The results were all odd. In order to keep this unusual ability from his roommates, he moved out of the dorm and used his savings to rent a basement that was modified into a single room in the neighborhood near his campus to continue his research of the system. However, after a month of deep research and having completed 7 to 8 missions, he spent all the points he got, but other than creating a dumb little monster, he got nothing useful. As for that dumb little monster, Su-young fixed his attention on the flower pot at the edge of his desk. In the pot was a twig that looked like it had deteriorated, but it was planted in the soil with 2 withered leaves holding on for dear life at the tip. This little monster's name was Gru. Gru, get me a glass of water. The moment his voice subsided, the withered twig moved. The 2 dry leaves grew all of a sudden and extended towards a glass which was taken to the drinking machine and filled. It was then delivered to Su-young. Gru. Thank you. Su-young took the glass of water and had a drink. He felt a lot more comfortable. Gru might seem useless, but at least, it proved that the system had endless possibilities. He spent all his savings from his first year as rent for the basement, and because of his study of the system, he had not been working part-time lately, thus his supplies were running low. However, Su-young believed everything that he did would be worth it in the end. Working part-time could only earn him that much, but this system would be the key to truly change his life around. It was the biggest gift from the heavens. As long as he could master the system, he was confident that he could change his and his family's circumstances and reach the zenith of his life. With that in mind, Su-young summoned the system with a thought and a translucent window appeared before him. The interface on the window was simple. There were only 2 rows. Mission and random points, 0. After he clicked on the mission tab, 3 more options dropped down. Random mission, bronze mission, silver mission. If Su-young completed the mission, he would get random points as the reward. As for the bronze and silver missions, after a whole lot of money for research, Su-young had yet to trigger any one of them. He wondered if he had not fulfilled a certain requirement for the missions to be triggered. Su-young looked at the items in his room. The things which he had not added points to had a virtual button in the shape of a plus beside it, meaning that he could add points to that item. Those items which he had added points to would display a white frame instead. For example, Gru the withered twig showed, withered twig +1. Its life has moved on to the next level, acquired low-level intellect and some simple abilities. Remark. It's really not that smart. On that rabbit with wings, there was, rabbit +1. Acquired a pair of useless wings. Remark. It might have a pair of wings but it isn't your angel. The book showed, book +1. Increase in size. Remark. Maybe you should grow a meter taller. The desk in the size of a palm displayed, desk +1. Reduced in size. Remark. It's suitable for kids to play with. The last, which was also the funniest, displayed, orange +1. Shape changed. Remark. Do you think it's an orange that tastes like a banana, or a banana that tastes like an orange? Why don't I shove the banana up your ***? Will it taste like an orange? Su-young flicked the middle finger at the orange banana. All the changes depended on luck. After all, it was called random points, so the outcome was entirely random, hence it was still acceptable. Maybe if he completed a bronze or silver mission, the points that he received might not be that random anymore. After adding the first point, the virtual plus button disappeared. Su-young believed he might need to fulfill certain conditions to be able to add points for a second time. While he was being carried away by his messy thoughts, a voice entered his mind. Ding! New random mission. A new random mission. Su-young had gotten used to the system distributing random missions, so he clicked on it calmly, went through it, and grumbled, saving a damsel in distress again. Isn't this a little outdated? Despite saying so, he grabbed his bag and a brick on the desk before he stormed out of the door. Meanwhile, in Su Yang's neighborhood, Chu Xiaoming was heading home after work. She was not very tall and had a doll-like face, which made her look cute. She was the type of girl who would emanate a comfortable feeling and leave an impression on people whenever she walked down the street. She had just graduated from her post-graduate studies and had been transferred to Shanghai University for work. Today was her first day back at the campus and she got caught up by the talks with her ex-lecturers, so she was a little later than usual. However, since the neighborhood was quite near to the campus, it was quite safe and she was not overly worried about her safety. The facts proved her right. She did not run into any trouble along the way and safely reached her neighborhood. Her house was in the south of the neighborhood. She hastened her steps and wanted to head home as soon as possible. However, when she was a few steps away from her own unit, a drunkard appeared. Chu Xiaoming picked up the alcoholic stench from a distance, and in order to save herself some trouble, she hugged her bag tightly and moved aside. Nevertheless, the drunkard still noticed her. His face was as red as a beet, and he squinted his eyes to size Chu Xiaoming up. He stopped his staggering steps and asked in a hoarse voice, "Why .your.n.new?" Although Chu Xiaoming's heart raced, she did not answer and walked straight ahead with her head down. Before she could walk further away, she felt a force on her shoulder and before she realized it, her bag tugged her back. The drunkard's voice then came into her ears, "Don't run. Why don't you say hello to your neighbor?" As a rookie in society, Chu Xiaoming had never experienced this before. Her heart pounded strongly and her mind was buzzing. Nevertheless, she forced herself to calm down. She turned around and said in a nervous tone, What do you want?" "I'm calling the cops." Even then, the drunkard was not afraid. He seemed to be a veteran in this as he squinted his eyes and opened his mouth with 2 rows of rotten teeth to mock her without any concern, "Go ahead. Even if the cops get here, all they will do is question me. I didn't lay a finger on you and I didn't do anything. I'm just saying hello." Chu Xiaoming dared not answer, she bit her lips tightly and tried to pull her bag, she failed. The fear in her heart made her eyes red. "What do you want?" "Hee, of course, I want to." The drunkard reached out to her with a perverted gaze. Right before he could touch her, a brick flew out from the darkness and smashed him precisely in the face. Blood splashed upon impact and his head started to bleed. Arg! The drunkard screamed in pain. He covered his head, staggering backward before he fell on his backside and passed out. Chu Xiaoming hugged her bag even tighter as she watched the scene with a dull look. Her pounding heart had somehow stopped. A series of footsteps echoed in the quiet street. A figure of 1.8 meters slowly walked out from the darkness. The handsome young man was obviously Su Yan, who had just come out from his basement. He had a bag with him as he walked over leisurely as if he had nothing to do with smashing a brick into the drunkard's face. Chu Xiaoming gulped nervously. She looked apprehensively at the young man walking closer to her. Her mind was blank as she had yet to recover from the shocking turn of events. She widened her mouth in an attempt to say something, but maybe because she was scared, no words came out from her. She did not know how she should face this young man. As Su Yang came closer, Chu Xiaoming's heart pounded even harder. Thud. Thud. Thud, be it feeling nervous or scared, her mind exploded with messy thoughts and she did not know what she should say. As she fell deeper into her dilemma, Su Yang reached her side. She mustered up her courage and opened her mouth. Su Yang squatted down and picked up the brick on the ground. Then, he wiped the blood off the drunkard and turned around. Chu Xiaoming was dumbstruck. Is he leaving? Her heart sank and she finally unsealed her mouth. She looked at Su Yang's back in disbelief and said, Don't you have anything to say? Right away, Su Yang paused. He tapped his head and said, Oh right, I'd have almost forgotten if you didn't remind me. Chu Xiaoming was just as nervous as before. Su Yang turned around, walked up to her, and fished a piece of paper from his pocket. He passed it to her and said, "Can I claim the taxi fare?" Chu Xiaoming widened her eyes in shock at him as she thought she had heard him wrongly. "I took a taxi here to save you. Can I claim the taxi fare?" he explained kindly. After she confirmed what she heard, her mind went blank. She did not even remember how she took her phone out and added Su Yang on WeChat before she transferred $21 to him. After all that, Su Yang walked away. Chu Xiaoming looked at his back again and the drunkard on the ground. She mustered up enough courage to shout, "What about him?" Su Yang replied without even looking back, "Don't worry. He won't die. He won't die." As Su Yang strayed further away, his voice lingered in the air. "I always save people like this. I know what I'm doing." Chu Xiaoming was rendered speechless. After he left, the neighborhood returned to silence. Chu Xiaoming stared at the unconscious drunkard on the ground and then at the receipt in her hand. The receipt showed that it was from 3 days ago. A smile twitched on her cute, round face. Chapter 2. The First Bronze Mission. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, Random Mission completed. Random points +1. After circling around half of the neighborhood, Su Yang arrived in his basement. He tossed his bag to Gru, which extended 2 withered branches out to catch it accurately before placing it on the floor. Su Yang changed into his slippers while humming a melody. He went to the bathroom to wash the brick and his hands. As he washed his hands, he complained, "Always saving a damsel in distress. It was fun at first, but it's getting boring. Does the system have any innovative missions? Can't I help an old lady cross the road? If not, why can't I send some blessings to some aunties? Anyhow, I got 21 yuan from this, so I guess tomorrow's meals will be settled." After he realized that the girls he saved never repaid him by marrying him, with the most they did buying him a meal, Su Yang applied the rule of a million changes in a single method. Thus he started to collect fees. First of all, he was poor. Secondly, he had been extra poor lately. However, he had his own principles as well. While collecting the fees from the girls, he would pick up some taxi receipts as proof at least, so the girls that he saved could claim it from their companies. After all, Su Yang had practically protected the employees of the respective companies. This was much more practical than buying him a meal. The girls could save money and Su Yang could earn a little money, hence it was a win-win situation. After he dried the brick and wiped his hands, he tidied up and checked the system. In the random points column, his points had increased from 0 to 1. He then went to bed in silence. On the morning of the second day, Su Yang was woken up by notifications from his WeChat. He slowly opened his sleepy eyes and picked up his phone beside his bed. He tapped it and saw a message from Chu Xia, the secretary of the class committee. Chu Xia was a beautiful girl who was 172 centimeters tall. Slightly slender, had a palm-sized face and delicate facial features. She had always been told that she was photogenic, so her closer classmates always teased and encouraged her to enter the entertainment industry and said that she might even become a famous actress overnight. To be honest, her features were really attractive. During the first day of military training, she was spotted by a faculty lecturer and was immediately invited to host the welcoming dinner as a freshman with the 4th-year seniors. This made her famous among the freshmen and 1st-year students of the Faculty of Arts. Whilst she captured the hearts of many men, she also painstakingly shielded herself from the harsh sun. Therefore, after the military training ended, everyone was deeply tanned, but she alone remained as fair as a rose, which made her the target of the girls in the class for a while. Su Yang recalled many other girls in the class getting together and isolating her. Be it during lectures, meals, or even back in the dorm, no one wanted to be friends with her. However, sometime later, Chu Xia was accepted by the other girls again, although no one knew why. This matter became a mystery that the boys in class hoped to find out, but the other girls in the class kept their mouths shut no matter how the boys bribed them for an answer. Su Yang was quite close to Chu Xia, or rather, she was quite close to everyone in the class. She was earnest and responsible. She even cared for her classmates and was a beautiful secretary of the class committee, so everyone liked her. Su Yang unlocked his phone and tapped on the WeChat app. Chu Xia. Don't try to escape English class today. There's a new lecturer. Names will be taken one by one. A new lecturer. Su Yang's blurry mind slowly cleared up. It seemed like he could no longer skip class today. I was thinking of going to work today. Fine, I guess I'll go to class. It'll be bad if I fail the subject. With that in mind, he replied with, "Thank you." He was truly grateful for Chu Xia because since he was working part-time, he always skipped classes. She was the one who covered for him all the time. Otherwise, he would have failed the subject due to his lack of attendance. After he replied Chu Xia, Su Yang suddenly noticed a new contact in his friend list with the nickname Puffy Chu. The profile picture was the side profile of a girl's face. She resembled the girl whom he saved last night. Su Yang tapped on her profile and saw the transfer record. Yeah, it should be the girl from last night. The girl was just a passerby and would remain as such in the future, so Su Yang deleted the contact. After he deleted the contact, he tidied up and told Gru to take care of the house and not let strangers in before he headed out for his English class. English was a major subject in university and the class was held in a lecture hall of the main faculty building. When Su Yang reached the lecture hall, many students were already inside, including Chu Xia. Her black hair tumbled over her shoulders. Wearing a beige coat with a black T-shirt inside, she appeared simple but fashionable. She was chatting happily in the middle of several other girls. The presence of youth overflowed from her delicate features. When she saw Su Yang enter, she waved at him by way of greeting. Su Yang nodded and sat down in an empty seat at the last row of the lecture hall. While he was scrolling through his phone, he was thinking about where he should use the random point from last night. Should I add the point to a pen? The pen might automatically write down the location of a treasure, or maybe it can become a fairy that can predict the future. Even if the pen fairy can't predict the future, I can use it to perform a magic trick and earn some extra money. Close-up magic. A pen that moves by itself. That's quite catchy. No one will be able to find its flaw. Or should I add the points to my bank card? Will I be able to withdraw endless money? Then, I'll become the CEO of a famous company, marry a rich and fair bride, and reach the peak of my life. I won't be arrested by the bank, will I? The more Su Yang fantasized about it, the more excited he got. A man always had the right to dream. Even though there was a high chance that the item that he added the point to would turn out strange, his life was already bland enough, so why could he not fantasize sometimes? While his fantasies ran wild in his head, a pair of high heels clicked-clacked outside the lecture hall. A while later, a girl with a doll-like face and average height who looked no older than Su Yang came in. The students whispered to one another. Is this our new English lecturer? She's cute. Yeah, she's cute, but she looks younger than all of us. Su Yang curiously raised his head and was dumbstruck. Isn't she that damsel I saved last night? No, I think she should be the girl I tricked for money. Su Yang scratched his head and looked extremely bothered. Great, I just scammed my new lecturer's money last night. My luck has been *TTY lately. Amitabha, please, gods of the heavens and Jesus, save me. Please don't let the new lecturer notice me. He lowered his head and started to mumble some prayers. Chu Xiaoming did not notice him at all. It was a major subject after all, hence 3 classes from the entire course attended the lecture together. There were 100 students in the lecture hall, so how could she have noticed the dumb Su Yang? She took a deep breath and gulped to suppress her pounding heart. She stepped on the podium and placed her lecture notes on the desk beside it. She glanced over the entire lecture hall with a sharp gaze, and her doll-like face showed nothing but a serious look. Ms. Zhang is on maternity leave from today onwards, so I'll be her replacement for English until the end of the semester for the first year. Her introduction was brief. She then picked up a piece of chalk and firmly wrote down her name on the blackboard, Chu Xiaomeng. My name is Chu Xiaomeng. I'm no older than you and I just graduated from university a while ago. You can call me Ms. Chu or just Sister Chu. I'll be taking your names now. In less than a minute, Chu Xiaomeng built her stern and strict image in front of the students. If Su Yang had not noticed that her stomach and legs were slightly shaking and her left elbow was pale, he would really have believed that the girl, who had been as cowardly as a quail last night, had turned into a lioness. However, after he noticed the details, Su Yang could not help but feel delighted. It seemed like the new lecturer was very nervous. She made herself appear strict because she wanted to control the situation and the students. Nevertheless, her efforts were effective. All the students in the lecture hall sat up straight. No one dared to look down on this new lecturer who was just a few years older than them. After she saw that the students were frightened by her stern demeanor, Chu Xiaomeng heaved a breath of relief. She curled her fists subtly behind the podium and encouraged herself in her mind. Chu Xiaomeng, you can do it. Chu Xia. Present. Chuan. Present. Taking the names of 100 students took about 10 minutes. Su Yang's family name started with S, which put his name in the middle of the name list. Therefore, he made it through the roll call without any problem. However, maybe because the person he scammed before was giving a lecture on the podium, Su Yang barely paid any attention for a while, but he realized he could not understand anything. His command of English had been bad ever since his high school days. Therefore, when he had filled in the details for his desired course, he had purposely picked Chinese literature. Other than having more job opportunities, he thought he could free himself from the clutch of the English language. In the end, he still ended up in an English class. He really wanted to pry open the lecturer who arranged the course subject and see what was in his brains. Why would the Chinese literature course have an English subject? He recalled only getting 60 marks in his English semester test during the first half of the semester, which was a borderline pass. He then watched Chu Xiaomeng, who started to mess up her lecture and exhibit the quirks of a dorky girl. He somehow felt like he had a grudge against English. Chu Xiaomeng was really flustered. Right before the lecture, she still had some confidence, but as the lecture went on and she looked at the 100 students in front of her, she started to feel more and more nervous. The more nervous she got, the more mistakes she made, and the more mistakes she made, the more nervous she got. Her mind was slowly turning blank while she started to mess up her words. There were even a few times when she pronounced a word wrongly. She was starting to regret not listening to her ex-lecturer's advice last night. When she visited her ex-lecturer last night, the latter had taught her how to build her image in front of the students. The lecturer also advised her to ask Ms. Zhang to take on this major class before her maternity leave. After all, it was a major class with 100 students. Anyone else with a weaker mentality would have been easily frightened, and it might have been a little too overwhelming for a freshie lecturer's first day. However, Chu Xiaomeng believed that Ms. Zhang was in a very important phase of her life, so she did not want to disturb her and she believed she could handle it. In the end, she started to lose it. The encouraging words in her mind changed from, "You can do it," to, "Chu Xiaomeng, you must not cry." As a matter of fact, most of the students in the lecture hall started to notice signs of Chu Xiaomeng's nerves, but her harmless doll-like face plus her dorky attitude really discouraged them from disturbing her. Instead, everyone feigned a blind eye and listened to her lecture carefully. Soon, the class ended. Su Yang kept his head low throughout the lecture and did not get noticed by Chu Xiaomeng. After he realized that stooping was effective, he decided to sit in the last row during English class and try his best to avoid eye contact with Chu Xiaomeng. Maybe a week or two later, she would forget that he had scammed her money, then he would slowly emerge as a new person. Just when he thought he could slip away unnoticed, a voice entered his mind. Ding! Bronze mission triggered. Help the new English lecturer. Chapter 3. I want to catch a shark. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. What the hell? Where did the mission come from? Su Yang lifted his head up and looked at the podium. Chu Xiaomeng's face was pale and blank as she tidied up her lecture notes. Is this woman on drugs or something? Why is there a continuous mission from her? It doesn't look like something is going to happen to her. What am I supposed to help her with? With that in mind, Su Yang tapped on the mission. Bronze mission. Help the new English lecturer. The new English lecturer will accidentally step on a book and fall, which will cause her to fracture her bones. Please help her and stop it from happening. Su Yang switched his attention back to the podium and saw a book beside the podium. It seemed like it had been left behind by some forgetful student. The book was thin and had a plastic cover. It looked slippery enough, and if one stepped on it, one might be able to slide 5 meters. After a glance at Chu Xiaomeng, Su Yang averted his gaze and lowered his head. He pinched his nose and said loudly, "Miss Chu, there's a book on the floor." He was quite loud to the point that the other students in the lecture hall were shocked. They even turned around and tried to search for the owner of the voice. However, Chu Xiaomeng zoned out and automatically filtered Su Yang's loud reminder out. After a terrifying lecture, every bit of strength in her body was drained and her mind was empty. All the noise went in from her left ear and went out from her right ear immediately. Even if someone went up to her and called her a name to her face, she might not have been able to respond, let alone hear a voice from the end of the lecture hall. Su Yang thought after a loud reminder, his mission would be completed, yet he did not get a response from Chu Xiaomeng. She tidied up her notes blankly and started to toddle down the podium. 1 step, 2 steps. Chu Xiaomeng was getting off the podium. Su Yang could no longer sit back and do nothing. He dashed out like an arrow that had been released, and under the strange gazes from all the other students, he ran down the steps from the last row. Chu Xiaomeng was empty-minded but not blind. Her foot froze in mid-air as she turned to the student who raced towards her. She did not know what to do or how to respond. As Su Yang got closer, she started to recognize his face. Ha! Isn't this the guy who saved me last night but also scammed my money? Just as her muddled mind started to function, Su Yang reached her side. She widened her eyes and pointed at him. Aren't you? Su Yang did not reply. Instead, he kicked the book away and strode out of the lecture hall without looking back. Chu Xiaomeng, the student who had left the book on the floor, and the other departing students were all rendered speechless by Su Yang's action. No one understood what he just did. No one expected that the blank Chu Xiaomeng would have fallen because of the book. No one also expected that her bones would be fractured due to the fall and that she would have to be on medical leave after her glorious first lecture. Only Su Yang knew what he just did and what he had prevented. After saving Chu Xiaomeng for a second time, Su Yang mumbled to himself as he strolled along the corridor, "I'm really a good guy. I just can't stand girls getting hurt. If she fell and fractured her bones, she might have to take the rest of the semester off and I'd be free, but I didn't do it." Of course, he would never admit that he did it for his mission. If he exposed himself now, he would never be at peace. He was clueless about the rewards of a bronze mission, and if the reward was not worth it, he would be on the losing end. With that in mind, he went into an empty lecture room, and after he made sure he was alone, he rubbed his hand before clicking on the "Check Reward" button. Right away, he got a notification from the system. Completed bronze mission. Acquired bronze point. Able to add the point to one of the randomly provided abilities. After the notification, an option window appeared and there were 3 options for him to choose from. 1. Shark. Catching. 2. Close combat. 3. Backflip on the spot. What? Su Yang was surprised. This was not within his expectations. Did the system even provide all kinds of abilities? Did it work not just on items but on everything else? Could points be added to all things on Earth? Could he add points to money. Earning abilities? Or add the points to his English. Speaking ability? After a quick glance, Su Yang saw a little question mark at the top of the options window. He tapped on it. The introduction of the bronze mission reward appeared. After you complete the bronze mission, you will be provided with 3 random abilities and rewarded with 1 bronze point. The bronze point can be added to any one of the abilities provided. After adding it, you will acquire the ability without learning or practicing it. Cool. If it randomly provides me with a money. Earning ability, I won't have to worry about my meals anymore. With that in mind, Su Yang felt excited. However, as he glanced over the 3 abilities again, a pail of cold water was splashed on his excitement. He was really unlucky. What kind of abilities did the system provide? What's with the close combat ability? A backflip on the spot. Am I supposed to join the UFC or a circus? If this is the case, will the system provide me with a sword. Swallowing ability in the future? Will I be able to swallow even the hilt if I added all the points to that ability? People usually call for a sword in a fight, but in my case, I might have to vomit it out of my mouth. Disgusting. After another careful look at the 3 abilities, Su Yang decided to go with shark. Catching without a second thought. It was probably the coolest out of the 3. He ought to become the coolest person at sea. Therefore, Su Yang tapped on the shark. Catching ability, and just when his anticipation was overflowing, a notification came in. Ding! No sharks or sea detected. Unable to initialize this ability. He was rendered speechless once again. What? Then, why did you list it out? Can I still get it if I go to the sea? Or the aquarium? While Su Yang was thinking, another notification came from the system. Due to the failure of initializing, the second option will be automatically selected. Congratulations on acquiring a close combat ability. L.C. Following the latest notification, the other 2 abilities disappeared and, close combat, turned into, elementary close combat. At the same time, a bunch of basic close combat knowledge gushed into Su Yang's head, including how to spin his elbow, how to overthrow his opponent, and how to lock his opponent's joints. The knowledge and techniques fused with his body and became part of his instinct. He instantly became a veteran who had several years of close combat experience, and he became very familiar with every action and movement. Due to his body reflexes, Su Yang instinctively followed his muscle memory and performed a set of punching techniques. His right foot moved behind his left foot as support and launched a left kick to the side. When his left foot landed, his left shoulder moved up to block, followed up by a right uppercut. A kick-uppercut combo was performed smoothly and the briskness made him look like he was an expert. Not bad. Su Yang felt a little better even though he still wanted to catch a shark. After he selected his ability, he looked at his watch. It was already afternoon and he had 1 more class next, which was the Modern History Essentials of Huaxiao. The semester test was an open-book test, so he did not really have to study for it. Some thoughts later, Su Yang decided to head home to accumulate points. He had to come up with something profitable soon and solve the problem at hand first since his money was really running low. With that in mind, he picked up his bag and headed out of the campus. When he was at the entrance of his neighborhood, the guard at the security booth held him up and dragged him aside. Su Yang always greeted the guard politely whenever he passed the security booth, so they were quite close. The guard dragged Su Yang beside the booth and whispered, "Did you step on old Sixth Lu's tail?" Su Yang failed to react to the conversation. Old Sixth Lu. The guard carefully looked around before he said, "Yeah, the little gangster in our neighborhood, that old Sixth Lou. I heard he was knocked out by someone yesterday and he's trying to find the perpetrator today. After a whole day, it seems like he's onto something. Earlier today, he even came by and asked for you. I saw him bring 2 of his men inside the neighborhood, so you'd better be careful. Chapter 4. New random mission. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Right after the guard's explanation, Su Yang immediately connected the dots. The person he had smashed with the brick last night was old Sixth Lou. As a matter of fact, old Sixth Lou was quite famous in the neighborhood. He was not famous because of him being a drunkard but because he was afraid of his wife. According to the old Sichuan saying, he would be the proverbial wife's slave. Old Sixth Lou was a gangster. Whenever he was drunk, he would cause problems around the neighborhood, but he had a wife that could control him. She was in her early 30s. She was quite beautiful and mature but always very fierce. As an after-meal exercise, she would beat old Sixth Lou up. Old Sixth Lou acted like a tyrant outside, but whenever he was home, especially in front of his wife, he was like a mouse in front of a cat. He gave in quickly and dared not even talk loudly to her. People once joked that he loved his wife, but he shook his head with a sigh. That's not love. It's just that I can't overcome that lioness. No matter how cowardly he was at home, no one messed with him outside. He had many men around the area and none of them had to work, so they usually wandered around all day doing nothing. Despite old Sixth Lou's notoriety, Su Yang did not even feel anything in his heart. The Badlands gave birth to unruly people. He had grown up in a village surrounded by mountains, so he had seen quite a lot in that rural area. It was not someplace where the people of a modernized city could imagine, so old Sixth Lou did not frighten him at all. Nevertheless, no matter how calm he was, he might still have to go up against 3 of them at once. However, it was impossible, even more so since they were adults. With that in mind, Su Yang clenched his fists. Maybe that I have to rely on that close combat ability that the system gave me today. Let's hope it's useful since it's just an elementary ability. He thanked the guard for the heads up and headed into the neighborhood whilst the guard's reminder echoed in the air. As the guard expected, before Su Yang even reached his unit, old Sixth Lou intercepted him on a little path. Old Sixth Lou had bandages on his head, making him look like a mummy. He had a cigarette hanging from his mouth, and a fat and a slim man flanked him on both sides. They seemed to be discussing something. After Su Yang appeared, old Sixth Lou stopped talking and strutted forward. He sized Su Yang up from top to bottom and then raised a curious brow. He was everything but friendly when he asked, "Are you the one who ruined my date last night?" Then, before Su Yang could answer, old Sixth Lou's gaze became ferocious. He pointed at Su Yang's forehead with his hand after he removed the cigarette from his mouth. "Don't you King deny it. I knew it was you, you little punk. King Brick almost killed me. Quite the balls you have there. Which gang are you from?" "Campus Gang," said Su Yang. "I knew it. My source was right." Old Sixth Lou leered at him and arrogantly tapped his face. A student trying to become a hero and saving a damsel in distress. You have no idea who you've crossed. Right after that, his tone switched from delight to ferocity. His gaze was sharp as he glared at Su Yang. "I'll break you." The tap on Su Yang's face made him tilt his head instinctively. A tinge of burning rage was apparent in his gaze, but he replied with a smile, "Yes, yes, I know you will, Brother Six. Of course, you would, but..." He further gazed into old Sixth Lou's eyes and the insulting smile on his face was overflowing. "I'll smash your face with the brick again." Old Sixth Lou was caught off guard by the reply, and he was infuriated. How dare this punk student threaten me? Is he trying to defy me? King piece of sh*t. As he bellowed, he threw a punch at Su Yang. Su Yang was waiting for this moment. He was always good at .1 fights back in the village. If all old Sixth Lu and his men ganged up on him together, he might have too much to handle, so he decided to provoke the boss and take him down first. He was not afraid if it was a .1 fight. With old Sixth Lu gone, he would be able to settle the other two without any problem. With that in mind, Su Yang concentrated his gaze. He wanted to counterattack with his usual moves that he used back in the village, but at that moment, his body responded with another type of reaction as if it was a conditional reflex. Before Su Yang could reflect on it clearly, he followed his feelings and let his body move. He dodged the punch by moving his body aside. His left hand then grabbed old Sixth Lu's wrist while his right hand grabbed the forearm. He turned his body around and together with the motion, he hauled old Sixth Lu's right arm over his shoulder. All old Sixth Lu could do was squeal in shock before Su Yang flung him away. Su Yang finally reacted to the situation after his conditional reflexes subsided. It was the overthrow technique from the close combat ability. Holy sh*T. The close combat ability is F*King Great. Before Su Yang could celebrate, old Sixth Lu's men saw their boss being tossed out, so they shouted and jumped into the fight. Su Yang allowed his conditional reflexes to take over once more. The combination of a straight punch from his left fist and a jab from his right fist easily took down one of the men. He then turned around and landed a kick on the other man's abdomen, sending the man staggering backward. Su Yang knocked out one of them and defeated the other two in the blink of an eye, yet he was not even hurt. His fighting had surpassed what he displayed in the village squabble by a whole lot. So, this is the close combat ability the system has provided. And it's just an elementary ability. It's so powerful. Su Yang suppressed the excitement in his heart and put his foot over old Sixth Lu's chest. He looked at the two men, taunting them with a wave of his hand and saying arrogantly, "Come on. I've always liked 3-versus-1 fights." Su Yang's techniques and his intimidating words frightened the two men instantly. Those two dared not continue the fight and Su Yang immediately understood that they were just some punks who bullied the weak but feared the strong. He spat on the ground in disdain and turned away from the two men. With his foot on old Sixth Lu, he bent over and grabbed the man by the neck so that his head was slightly lifted up. Then, he slapped old Sixth Lu repeatedly. "Look who's talking right now. How dare you tap my face? Do you know how much my face is worth? What if you break it? Can you compensate me? And you said you want to break me. Can you?" Lifting old Sixth Lu's head might have seemed easy, but it caused torture to the man. Old Sixth Lu felt like his neck was being torn apart while his skin was burning. However, since he was able to roam the neighborhood for so long, he was also a tough guy. He clenched his teeth due to the pain and almost grind them into powder while his eyes stared straight at Su Yang as if he wanted to brand the young man's face into his brain for revenge. On the other hand, old Sixth Lu's tough expression was like the fuel that fanned Su Yang's raging fire. "This old Sixth Lu hit on Chu Xiaomeng yesterday and even tried to beat me up today. Does he think he's the law around here? More importantly, he didn't even submit after I beat him up. Is he trying to take revenge? I can't let him go like this." With that in mind, Su Yang's rage was burning brightly through his eyes and he planned to go all out with the beating. Right when the thought popped in his mind, he heard a voice in his head. Ding! New random mission has appeared. Su Yang was surprised. A new random mission at this time. He had a bad feeling about it. With a single thought, he tapped on the random mission, and as expected, the mission was to save old Sixth Lu and guarantee his safety. The mission was basically similar to saving a damsel in distress. The description for last night's mission had been, "Save your neighbor from the drunkard and guarantee her safety." Su Yang did not know whether to laugh or to be angry. He never thought that he would be part of the mission as an antagonist. What was this about? The hero saving the villain in distress. At that moment, he realized that the system did not have self-consciousness. It could only sense danger among people around him, and if the people around him might get hurt, he would get a mission to save that particular target. However, it could not differentiate the bad from the good. It seemed like this would be a problem that he had to pay attention to. He did not want to save a villain with his hard work. Of course, it would be a matter for the future. Now, the problem at hand would be whether to accept the mission or not. Su Yang looked at old Sixth Lu with a gloomy expression. He then took a deep breath to suppress the raging fire in his heart. Taking care of old Sixth Lu might be a rare chance, but the mission isn't a chance that will come by easily. I'll accept it first and come back to finish him. With that in mind, Su Yang got up from old Sixth Lu and coldly grunted, "You are lucky today." Old Sixth Lu glared at him from the ground, the ferocity in his eyes brazen. King cheater, we aren't done yet. Su Yang gawked as he pointed at old Sixth Lu and said without any courtesy, "Me neither." After that, he turned away without a second thought. Once the decision was made, he ought not to be hesitant about it. It was one of his mottos in life. After he reached his home, he got a notification in his mind. Random mission completed. Random point. +1, the mission is complete. I can take revenge now. Su Yang grabbed the brick from his desk and strode out of the door. He sprinted back to where the fight happened, but old Sixth Lu was nowhere to be found. As he pondered, his expression looked heavy. He tossed the brick away. Rubbing his face, he put on a harmless appearance before he headed to the security book. "Uncle, where's old Sixth Lu?" The guard heard Su Yang's voice and stuck his head out of the window. "I saw him and his men wandering away. I have no idea where they were heading. They went out of the neighborhood." Su Yang was not surprised. This was not a game, and old Sixth Lu was not a boss character who would wait for him for round 2. With that in mind, he thanked the guard before picking up his brick and returning home. He might not be able to find old Sixth Lu now, but he believed the only thing that could help him in this situation was the point system. He hoped to add points into something useful. Su Yang did not plan to let the man go from the start, and he did not plan to in the future. Chapter 5. Special Item. A fruit-loving pen. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. With that in mind, Su Yang's eyes started to circle around his room. What could he use to help him? A pen. A map. The brick. Should he add the points to his smartphone? After a while, Su Yang was still clueless, but it was normal. The result of random points was completely arbitrary after all, so no matter how well he planned ahead, he could not guarantee that the item that he added the points to would be helpful. Therefore, it did not matter what he added them to. It was all up to his luck. Maybe the gamble could transform a bicycle into a bike. Su Yang did not even have a bicycle, so it would be good enough if he could get one by adding points. With that in mind, he decided to go with the thought he had during class. His bank card and his pen. He was trying to minimize the risk. Even if he could not get something that could help him against old Sixth Lu, adding the points to something valuable would also be worth it. Moreover, he got 2 random points, so he could add them to the 2 items. He went to the bathroom to wash his hands and even used some soap for luck. After that, Su Yang grabbed a bank card that he barely used and opened the point system. On top of the bank card, a translucent plus icon appeared. He took a deep breath before tapping the icon. A soft gleam later, the point was added to the bank card. A description window appeared on the upper right of the bank card. Bank card +1. Material changed into gold. Remark. It is 999 pure gold. You can try to bite it. Gold. Su Yang's eyes gleamed brightly. He picked up the bank card and it felt heavier than before. He sized it up carefully and noticed that the plastic card had turned into gold. He softly bit the bank card and his teeth left a mark on it. Given his shallow knowledge about identifying gold, it was certainly pure gold. Without changing the size and volume of the bank card, the gold bank card still weighed over 70 grams due to the heavier density of gold. Su Yang quickly checked the price of gold. Based on the current price, it was 301 renminbi and 20 cents for a gram, and even if he could not fetch such a high price, a rough calculation later, he expected to get at least 20,000 renminbi. I'm rich. I'm rich. It was the first time adding a single point provided such a substantial return, and it boosted Su Yang's confidence. In the past month, he tried adding points to many things and everything practically ended up as a failure. It seemed like his luck was finally improving. Su Yang wanted to continue the success while he was feeling lucky. He took a ball pen from his drawer and added the point to it. The moment he tapped on the plus icon, he prayed hard for it to become something that could help him against Old Sixth Lu. He could then treat Old Sixth Lu as an NPC in a game for him to farm points and random missions. He would just beat the man up and then release him to complete the mission. By rinsing and repeating endless times, he could earn endless points. It would be the perfect outcome. With that in mind, the pen gleamed and the point was added. Su Yang felt pleased about the result because the appearance of the pen changed. It became a black steel pen with gold embellishments around it and it looked expensive. It was as exquisite as an art piece. Beside the steel pen was a translucent window. Pen +1. Acquired special ability. Appraise. A special ability. Su Yang's anticipation was over the moon. Would he get some special ability to take care of Old Sixth Lu? He tapped on, yes, without a second thought and the description of the pen changed. A fruit-loving pen, ability. Think of the person's face and write down his or her name. You will be able to determine the person's real time location. Cost. Every time you write a person's name, you must eat a fruit. Limit. The person you write must be within 20 kilometers of you, remark. Eating is not a sin since eating fruits can make you lose weight. Although the whole description sounded strange and ridiculing, when Su Yang went through it, he giggled. You can run Old Sixth Lu, but you can't hide. In the middle of the night, Old Sixth Lu was drunk again outside Su Yang's neighborhood. He was humming a melody as he staggered forward in a crooked line. As he tried to walk properly, he cursed out loud, that piece of sh*t. I won't forget that bastard. If I don't break him, I'm not Old Sixth Lu. I'll find him in a day or two, and then I'll teach him a lesson. I'll never let this go. While he was cursing, the air suddenly whistled and a familiar-looking brick flew out from the dark. Before he could respond, the brick struck his head again. He clutched his head and squealed in pain as he staggered, but he did not fall to the ground this time. Then, he saw a young man stride out from the dark corner. He tried to open his eyes wide and when he saw the face of the young man, he looked utterly ferocious. You again. Su Yang, even after his name was called out, Su Yang did not stop what he was doing. He strode up to Old Sixth Lu and grabbed the man by the hair mercilessly. He pressed the man's head down while he lifted his knee to his face. Bang! A heavy thud later, Old Sixth Lu was kneed in the face. His nose broke and started to bleed like a river. He felt dizzy and could barely stand still. Su Yang had the upper hand, so he did not plan to spare the man. After a successful hit, he tossed Old Sixth Lu on the ground like a ragdoll and jumped on him to continue punching and kicking him. He beat the man for 5 whole minutes, yet nothing happened. Su Yang felt strange. Why did the system not provide him with a random mission this time? Could the random mission only appear once a day for a single person? With that in mind, Su Yang stood up and wiped the blood off his hands with a piece of tissue. He picked up his brick and said leisurely, "We will continue this tomorrow." After that, he left. Looking at Su Yang's back, old Sixth Lu's bloody face looked sour while his eyes burned with rage. Is this little B** trying to get on my bad side? He is too arrogant. We will continue this tomorrow. If I can't win him in a fight, I can just hide. Just you wait, you little piece of sh*t. After these 2 days, I'll get 7 to 8 more men with me. No matter how good you are in a fight, you will be crushed by our sheer numbers. On the second day, when old Sixth Lu came out from a regular sauna place, Su Yang pounced on him and bagged him with a black rucksack. He dragged the man into an alley and started beating him up. Old Sixth Lu was on the brink of losing his patience. He clenched his teeth and swore to break Su Yang the next day. Su Yang, on the other hand, felt strange. Where is the random mission? Am I doing it in the wrong stance? On the third day, old Sixth Lu camped outside the entrance of the campus with his men to wait for Su Yang for a whole day, but they failed to catch him. In the end, after he split up with his men, Su Yang caught him and started the third round of beating. He caught me again. Is this a coincidence? Old Sixth Lu was dumbstruck by Su Yang's attack. Su Yang felt puzzled once more. Why am I doing wrong? Where didn't I trigger the mission? On the fourth day, old Sixth Lu and his men waited in front of Su Yang's house for the whole morning. They failed to capture Su Yang again, so old Sixth Lu went fishing with 3 of his friends after that. In the end, jumped out and kicked him from behind before starting the 4th round of beating. The 3 friends wanted to help, but Su Yang tossed all of them into the river. Old Sixth Lu lost it this time. How the hell did he find me? I didn't go home, I didn't wander around the neighborhood, and I spent my day outside. Yet he found me. Why can't I catch him with my men? At the campus and at his house, he just did not show up. But whenever I am alone, he will come out and beat me. Did this little F***er installed a GPS on me? Su Yang also lost it this time. He wondered if the system had broken down. Why could he not trigger a mission? He was having a difficult time. The fruit-loving pen was useful since he was able to know where old Sixth Lu was hiding, but he had to eat a piece of fruit every time he used it. On top of that, old Sixth Lu was always on the move. Whenever Su Yang got to the place, the man was already gone, so he had to eat a piece of fruit and write down the address to locate the man again. Besides that, old Sixth Lu had men with him at times, so Su Yang could only wait it out and ambush the man while he was alone. Therefore, Su Yang had to carry a lot of fruit with him just to carry out a single beating. At first, he tried eating an apple, but he realized that it was too big to eat on the move and he would get full by consuming that single fruit. Then, he went to the supermarket and tried to search for a better replacement. After some serious selection, he decided to go with fresh prunes. It was the smallest and cheapest fruit he could get. After all, after he moved out of the dorm, his savings had been running low in the past month and he did not want to ask money from his parents. Money had been slipping through his fingers like water, hence every single cent saved was a lifesaver. As he continued his experiment, he spent almost 2,300 yuan on fresh prunes and almost emptied his pockets. If he had not gotten the golden bank card from the addition of the point, he really would not have the support to take it this far. Chapter 6 Was punished to take down lecture notes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. For the 5th, 6th, and 7th days, Su Yang continued his experiment. He ambushed old Sixth Lu for a little over a week, and finally, the older man finally gave in. He had to since he could not find Su Yang on his own. Whenever he had men with him, Su Yang never appeared. However, whenever he was alone or left with a few of his men, Su Yang would jump out and beat him up. He could not defeat Su Yang or hide from him for some reason. After being beaten up for over a week, Old Sixth Lu was injured all over. He was a gangster that everyone stayed away from, but now, with his injuries all over, anyone who saw him would pity him. Those who heard of his encounter would even shed a tear. Su Yang also gained a reputation for himself in the neighborhood. Everyone knew that he was a fierce university student who could locate his target every time and take revenge for the slightest grievance. Under such circumstances, Old Sixth Lu had to swallow his misery. He found someone to act as a peacemaker and even invited Su Yang to dinner besides giving him a red envelope of 888 yuan as a token of apology. After giving the token of apology and inviting Su Yang to dinner, Old Sixth Lu completely gave in and acknowledged his mistake. On the other hand, after beating Old Sixth Lu up for so many days and not even triggering a mission, Su Yang was discouraged. Since he got the money and had already vented his emotions at the poor man, he did not want to get tangled up with Old Sixth Lu anymore. After all, his priority should be completing the system's mission to acquire points and continue developing himself. As for Old Sixth Lu, if the man learned his lesson, Su Yang would simply let him go. However, if Old Sixth Lu caused any more trouble in the future, he would come back and beat him up again. Maybe then, he could trigger another mission. Su Yang also needed an opportunity to change his life for the better. Other than getting the fruit.loving pen, from his point.adding experiment, he also got a gold bank card which could be sold for a lot of money. However, he had been doing research for the past week and had yet to find a reliable gold buyer. He needed a relatively safe place to convert the piece of gold bank card into cash, but before he could, Chu Xia came calling. In the past week, Chu Xia had been messaging Su Yang via WeChat to urge him to go to class, but he knew that Old Sixth Lu was waiting for him at the campus entrance, so he forced himself to stay back. This time, Chu Xia called him directly and told him not to skip class anymore. She had been covering for him for a week and could barely do it anymore. If Su Yang continued to be absent, he would be in big trouble. Therefore, after skipping classes for a week, given Chu Xia's urgent reminder, Su Yang finally went back to campus. The first class of the new week was Modern History Essentials of Huaxia, the class that Su Yang had skipped last week. The lecturer of this class was Mr. Zhou, and all the students called him Old Zhou behind his back. Old Zhou was a middle-aged man nearing his 50s. He had the patience of an old man and a serious bearing apart from a balding hairstyle. Su Yang reached the lecture 5 minutes before the class started, but Old Zhou was already there. When Old Zhou saw Su Yang walking in, he signed the young man to stop. "You're Su Yang, aren't you?" Su Yang paused and greeted his lecturer, "Sir." Old Zhou grunted in acknowledgement and nodded. He picked up his thermal flask, softly blew it, and took a sip before asking, "I didn't see you in my last class." Su Yang was stunned. "Did Old Zhou take attendance in the last class?" "I didn't hear anything from Chu Xia." With that in mind, he switched his gaze to Chu Xia, who was already in class, but before she could respond, Old Zhou beat her to it. He covered his thermal flask and said, "No need to look at her. I didn't take attendance during my last class. I just simply noticed you." Goosebumps exploded all over Su Yang's body. Being noticed by a middle-aged man was not exactly a pleasant feeling. Old Zhou slightly pushed his glasses up and said, "I remember that you didn't bring your textbook for a few classes, am I right?" After he heard what Old Zhou said, Su Yang could not help but think of the textbook, the Modern History Essentials of Huaxia, which had grown in size due to his failed attempt at adding points. It was currently in his room as decoration. He scratched his head and said, "Mr. Zhou, I can't take it out." Old Zhou grunted. "Did your textbook fly away or grow legs and run away? How can you not bring it out?" A quick thought later, Su Yang decided to be honest since no one would believe him. "It grew in size. It's almost as tall as me and a meter wide, so I really can't bring it out." He even extended his arms to show how big the book was. Their conversation at the podium attracted some attention from the other students. After they heard Su Yang's excuse, the students could not help but giggle with their hands covering their mouths. Everyone took pleasure in Su Yang's misfortune and thought that he was giving the lamest excuse possible. Old Zhou placed his thermal flask on the table as he heaved a heavy breath that made his beard flutter slightly while he widened his eyes at Su Yang. Your book has grown in size. Why don't you make your D**CK grow too? Su Yang awkwardly cleared his throat. He criticized in his heart, if I could make mine bigger, I would have. No man would complain about his own D**CK being bigger. Old Zhou thought that Su Yang realized his mistake after the young man kept quiet. He looked at his watch and it was almost time for class, so he waved at Su Yang and said, okay, I'm not asking a lot from you. You just need to take down all the lecture notes from that class and hand it to me tomorrow. Otherwise, I assure you that you will fail this subject this semester. Sir. Su Yang looked bitter. He was in university. Who took notes down in a lecture without any reason? Even if someone did, it would not be the notes of the modern history essentials of Huaxia since the semester test was an open book test. Don't serve me. Remember to find me tomorrow and bring your textbook to the next class. After that, old Zhou picked up his lecture notes and looked at the rest of the class. Class starts now. Su Yang helplessly sat down in an empty seat as the class began. This was an unexpected disaster. Was this karma for beating old 6th Lu too hard? Should he beat the man up again to even out the number since two negatives made a positive? As the class carried on, Su Yang quietly asked several of his classmates for lecture notes to copy while old Zhou was busy writing on the blackboard, but he did not get any. It was not because of his poor connection, but no one had taken notes of the lecture. In the end, after the class ended, Su Yang finally got some help from a straight-A student outside the classroom. He held that thick notebook in his hand as mixed feelings rumbled in his heart. As expected of a straight-A student. He took down so many notes for an open book test. If it were other subjects, would his notes be thicker than the textbook itself? After he got the notes that he sought, Su Yang hoisted his bag and headed home. As he walked home, he could not help but ponder about the research he had done on the gold buyers in the past few days. There were actually several ways to find a trustworthy gold buyer. The easiest and safest way was to sell the gold at some famous jewelry chain stores such as Gong Tai Fuk or Gong Sang Sang One, but the famous jewelry chain stores would only buy back their own gold jewelry and they required a receipt and a complete proof of purchase. Su Yang could never sell his gold bank card there. The gold buyers who did not need proof of purchase would be the typical pawn shops, private goldsmiths, house-to-house buyers, or internet buyers. However, after much research, he realized that all the house-to-house buyers and internet buyers were all scams whereby he might even lose his safety and gold together. As for the private buyers and typical pawn shops, there were many hidden costs and tricks involved. If there was no trustworthy recommendation, he would probably lose a big portion of his earnings. He was not a local in the capital, so of course, he did not have access to such channels which put him in a difficult situation. Just when he was troubled by his thoughts, he looked up and saw a familiar figure ahead of him. Upon a closer look, he realized it was Chu Xia, the secretary of the class committee. Isn't Chu Xia living in the campus dorm? Why is she out here? While he was wondering, Chu Xia turned into a shop. Su Yang looked up at the shop signage. Upless Convenience Store. A convenience store. There was one on the campus and another beside the campus, so why would Chu Xia come all the way here to a convenience store in Su Yang's neighborhood? Chapter 7. Unspeakable Secret. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Although he did not know what Chu Xia was trying to do, Su Yang did not plan on finding out. Everyone had their own secrets anyway. Besides, he always believed in the saying, femme fatale. The more beautiful a woman was, the more dangerous she would be, and given Chu Xia's looks, she might be able to bring down the whole city. Therefore, it was better to stay away from her. With that in mind, carrying the bag over his shoulder, Su Yang walked across the convenience store entrance without a second thought and headed into his neighborhood. Those who are curious can go find out themselves. I don't have any, and I'm a man with principles. However, right after he made the turn onto the street, a beep came into his mind. It was a new random mission. Ha! New random mission. From where? Su Yang stopped and tapped on it. Help Chu Xia to settle her problems at hand and ease her worries. Chu Xia. Worries. His curiosity was piqued. Chu Xia was widely known as the sunny girl in class. Why would she have worries? It seemed like everyone had a side that was not known to others. With that in mind, he turned around and looked at the convenience store that he walked past. A quick thought later, he decided to accept the mission. It turned out that principles were actually worth as much as potato chips. After he ate them, he still had to accept the mission. After accepting the mission, Su Yang headed into the convenience store. Right after he stepped in, Su Yang heard the shop assistant speaking in an unfriendly tone, "Miss, are you trying to play a joke on me? You are taking too long and it's not the first time already. In the past few weeks, every time you come by to pay for your items, you just have to waste everyone's time by standing here. We don't have time for this. There are people lining up behind you." Chu Xia's delicate face was slightly red while a layer of nervous sweat was on her forehead. She turned around and saw the line, then she glanced at the receipt in her hand. She looked terribly helpless. Her mouth was tingling. She was actually mumbling, 3.50 plus 6 equals .8.50. 8.50 plus 12, plus 20.50 plus 20.60. Su Yang was shocked by the scene. Does Chu Xia not know how to count? After counting for a while, the sweat on her forehead started to roll down her cheeks. She mumbled, "No, it's not correct. The amount is wrong." "Hold up, I'll count it with my phone," she said nervously to the store assistant, then she fished out her smartphone. The store assistant sighed. "Miss, do you even know how to count? It's just a small amount, yet you have to bring out your phone. And it's a receipt generated by a machine. How can I be wrong?" After the store assistant complained, Chu Xia got upset. She blushed and glared at the store assistant with her big eyes. "Oh, of course, I know how to count. I got 140 points for maths during my high school." It was the first time Su Yang saw Chu Xia getting so angry and he was really shocked. Chu Xia was known for her good temperament, yet she lashed out at the store assistant. It seemed like she was really nervous. Frightened, the store assistant raised his hands and surrendered. Okay, I got it. I'll keep quiet." Su Yang had no intention to let this farce continue. The people behind Chu Xia were starting to get restless. He stepped up and grabbed the receipt from her hand. A quick calculation later, the total amount was correct. "Did you buy all these things?" he asked her. Chu Xia gazed into Su Yang's eyes blankly. She never expected to see him in the store, but she nodded blankly. Su Yang grabbed his smartphone and tapped on the Alipay payment option. "I'm sorry. My friend has been having a hard time lately. I'll pay for her." The store assistant took the QR code for Su Yang to scan. "It's done." Su Yang then grabbed the items Chu Xia bought and grabbed her by the sleeve before they left. Chu Xia lowered her head throughout the process and did not utter a word. The fierceness that she exhibited previously was gone and the sunny image that she exuded on campus was also absent. Su Yang brought her to a garden in his neighborhood and sat down on a bench. He put the items before her and started, "You Chu Xia lowered her head and did not answer. Su Yang did not want to say anything since she did not want to talk about it. The two of them sat down quietly for over 10 minutes before Chu Xia finally whispered as soft as a mosquito, "Thank you. Don't sweat it. You helped me a lot as well. But if you can pay me back, I'll thank you instead," he said after a quick pause. Chu Xia looked at him in surprise. She could not help but giggle. "You are really stingy. Of course, every cent is mine and my parents' hard-earned money. I must save whenever I can." Su Yang smiled in reply. She clicked her tongue and said, "It's just like how money fell from the sky for me." Su Yang looked up to the sky. "What are you looking at?" Chu Xia asked curiously. "I'm waiting for money to fall." Chu Xia was rendered speechless, but because of the little joke, she brightened up a little. She finally opened up and explained, "Actually, ever since I was young, I have this little problem. I can't count in my head or even verbally. I can't even count 3 plus 2 properly. After I went for a check up at the hospital, the doctors told me I might have an unusual kind of calculation disorder. I became the joke among my classmates ever since then, and it became a secret that I never told anyone. When I grew older, maybe the condition got better, or maybe I got better by familiarizing myself with it, so I'm able to add and subtract from 1 to 10, but beyond 10, I have to write it down." "What's 5 plus 4, asked Su Yang. "9, Chu Xia was stunned for 2 seconds before she came up with the answer. Su Yang tapped on his chest and acted like he was relieved. "Thank goodness our class secretary isn't an idiot." She pouted and gave him a soft punch. The punch was only stronger than an itch and was quite comfortable. Chu Xia then looked further away and said softly, "That's why I came all the way here to buy stuff. I never thought I'd run into you here." "I live nearby," he said. She adjusted her sitting posture. Her slender long legs were straight and beautiful. This girl had a pair of legs that all women would be envious of. "Because of the trauma, I cannot accept others criticizing my maths. Whenever I hear people criticizing my counting, I easily get angry. That is why the hardest subject for me during high school was maths, and I only got 140 points." Su Yang moved his gaze away from her legs. "I thought you were cheating." Chu Xia glared sharply at him. "Are you trying to be funny? Why do you keep teasing me?" He was playfully chuckling behind his hand, and soon Chu Xia was infected too. She giggled before she sighed. "When I chose the course for tertiary education, I picked Chinese literature because this course has nothing to do with maths. I've really had it with those numbers." He moved his hand away from his mouth and looked at her in astonishment. "Me too." Chu Xia blinked at him. "You hate maths too?" Su Yang shook his head. "Nope, but I hate English and picked Chinese literature because I want to escape from English env." Chu Xia blinked blankly and said, "But our course has English as a major." Su Yang facepalmed himself. "Forget it about it. It's all blood, sweat, and tears." As her eyes curled up into crescent moons, she covered her mouth in laughter. Because of Su Yang's jokes, she obviously felt better. The two of them chatted for a while longer, and after Su Yang promised to keep it a secret, Chu Xia took her items and headed back to campus. Su Yang had a heavy feeling as he watched her skip away. "This girl hasn't paid me back the money." Chapter 8. Cash in the gold card at the gold shop. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Other than the 888 yuan red envelope that he got from old Sixth Lu, Su Yang only had that gold bank card left. On top of that, he had yet to find a reliable place to sell it. He was really running out of money. Thankfully, before he even reached his neighborhood, Chu Xia transferred him the money that he helped her pay earlier, and she even added several voice messages. "Oh, I forgot to tell you that you don't need to rush the notes for modern history. I went to old Joe's place after class and asked him to spare you a few more days. You can just hand it to him next Monday. I thought I'd call you at night to tell you about it, but now is a better chance. Still, try not to skip classes anymore. Even if I cover for you, there are some lecturers who have started to notice you. Our new English lecturer, Miss Chu, has asked me about you a few times already. Su Yang felt warm after listening to the message. He must admit that Chu Xia was heartwarming at times. However, was Chu Xiaoming starting to ask about him? It must be because he had scammed her money and left her class abruptly, so she must have remembered him because of all that. Su Yang started to wonder what she would do to him. While he was at it, he replied, "Thank you." Miss Chu Xia generously replied to him, "I should be thanking you." Su Yang knew she was referring to the secret. Following the message, a beep came into his mind. Mission complete. Random point. +1, Su Yang grinned as he got another random point. Maybe today was his lucky day. Just as he celebrated getting another random point, a thought came into his mind. If I am not mistaken, Chu Xia is a local Shanghainese. Maybe she or her friends might know a reliable gold shop. With that in mind, Su Yang fished out the smartphone that he kept away and wrote a message on WeChat. "Oh right, do you or your friends know any reliable gold shops? Or a pawn shop? I have a piece of jewelry I want to sell." Less than 2 minutes later, Chu Xia replied to him. "I don't know any, but I have a friend who might. Gimme a minute." He was prepared for a barrage of questions from her, but to his surprise, the girl did not even probe and asked for a reliable source for him right away. When Su Yang reached his basement, her reply came in. Number 26 Yangon Alley. There's a shop named Dafa Gold Shop. My friend said her friend opened it. You can look for the owner, Little Boss Tang, and say that Jiang Yan introduced you. Su Yang replied with a thanks and put his bag down. He then searched for this pawn shop. He was a cautious person. Even though it was Chu Xia's friend's introduction, there was still a wall in between them, and it would be much better if he could search it himself. Su Yang searched for the shop via several search engines with review functions. All the reviews and ratings were quite high, except for a few poor reviews that criticized some minor details. He finally lowered his guard. It seemed like this recommendation was reliable, but as for the real deal, he had to pay a visit to know for himself. He keyed in the address of the shop and checked the distance from his place. It was not too far away, and there was public transport that could reach the place in around 40 minutes. He then searched for the shop's number and called it to make sure it was still open, because he did not want to reach the place and find it closed. In the end, he tidied up and headed to the gold shop. 50 minutes later, he arrived at the entrance of Dafa Gold Shop. Yangon Alley, where Dafa Gold Shop was at, was located at the most prosperous outer harbor of Shanghai. The outer harbor was filled with skyscrapers and neon signages, yet the alley preserved its old architectural style from the olden days of the Republic of China. All the buildings in the alley looked old, so the whole alley felt like a deviant in the modern metropolis, Shanghai. Despite this, the city council could not afford to tear the place down. After all, every inch of land in the Shanghai city center was as expected to be gold, and tearing down a whole alley with old buildings that had 2 to 3 stories was costly. The construction could not be carried out without a few million yuan. Regardless of which, having a gold shop in Yangon Alley meant that the owner was not only rich but extremely rich. However, when Su Yang glanced over at the design of Dafa Gold Shop, it felt cheap, as if it was owned by someone who got rich overnight. The whole shop was dazzling brightly. The display racks and signage were in gold, and even the glass was gold-plated. At first glance, even if it was already evening, it looked blinding. Su Yang did not look down on the design of the place because it meant wealth. Especially for someone who got rich overnight, it must be a lot of money. He wanted to be rich overnight too, and if one night could not be enough, he could wait for 2 nights or even half a month. He did not mind. Unfortunately, he had not gotten rich, thus he was here to sell the gold bank card. When he walked into the shop, the interior was overwhelming with gold. The floor was gold, the table was gold, and even the counter was gold. It seemed like the person who designed this place was not afraid of mixing everything up with the same tone. A salesperson came up to Su Yang and asked, "Good evening, sir, how can I help you?" Su Yang glanced around the golden shop and said, "I'm here for the owner, Little Boss Tang. A friend introduced me." The salesperson was obviously shocked for a moment when she heard what Su Yang said. She sized him up from top to bottom and guided him inside without even informing the owner. "This way, please," she said. Su Yang thought he would at least get some questions, but things turned out to be smoother than he expected. The first reaction in his head was that there must be something fishy going on. The salesperson led Su Yang to a golden door with a golden koi fish in front as decoration. Su Yang pointed at the koi fish and asked, "What's this for?" "This is the golden koi. Hanging it over the door symbolizes the koi fish jumping over the dragon gate, or prosperity," the salesperson explained. Su Yang nodded. It seemed like the owner did not just have poor taste but was quite superstitious as well. After the door was opened, Su Yang realized that he had underestimated the owner's level of superstition. The whole office was decorated in an old-fashioned manner. Opposite the entrance was an altar with 2 red candles on it to worship the fortune gods of the 5 paths. Sugar cane, mandarin oranges, apples, and persimmons were used as offerings. Su Yang knew what it meant without the salesperson explaining. It symbolized an increase in profit, good fortune and auspicious blessings, peace and security, and that one's dream may come true. There was a bloated young man who seemed prosperous standing in front of the altar. He was putting 3 joss sticks on it and it seemed like he was done with his prayers. When Su Yang and the salesperson entered, the man turned around and his plump face broadened with a wide smile, revealing a row of golden teeth that sparkled brightly. Su Yang's heart was pounding. The man's appearance might have resembled a wealthy landlord in the past, but now, he just looked cheap and lousy as if he was a gangster in a drama series. Combined with the room, the decoration, and the settings, no matter how he looked at it, the whole place felt like a fraud. Therefore, on second thought, Su Yang looked at the salesperson and said, "I think I might have gotten the wrong person. I'm sorry." He then turned around. Chapter 9. Tang Dafa, also a fortune teller. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Maybe because little Tang did not expect Su Yang to turn around without giving a proper explanation, he got nervous and held him back. Hey, my man, my bro, yes. You are in the right place. Jiang Yan introduced you, didn't he? After the name was mentioned, Su Yang felt embarrassed to walk away just like that since Chu Xia had introduced him to go there, and if he walked away, it would put everyone in an awkward situation. He sighed and turned around. Little Tang showed a wide smile after Su Yang turned around. His dazzling gold teeth were flashing again. "Yes, that's it. We're all friends. Don't judge me by my looks. I'm really a good man." Su Yang smiled. "I came from a rural village and my mom said those who claim to be good are mostly scammers who try to trick my money." Ahem. Little Tang almost choked on his own saliva. He grabbed Su Yang with his fat hands and said, My, young Master Jiang introduced you to me. I wouldn't dare to trick you." He signaled his salesperson to leave them alone before he dragged Su Yang to a seat. He then handed him a name card. "Let me officially introduce myself. I'm Tang Dafa, the owner of Dafa Gold Shop. People usually call me Little Boss Tang." He widened his mouth and showed his signature golden teeth again. The glare from the golden teeth blinded Su Yang for a second. Yes, Tang Dafat, I'm Su Yang. I want to cash in a piece of gold that I have," he replied. Little boss Tang corrected Su Yang by saying, "It's Dafa, Tang Dafa." Su Yang nodded. Yes, I'm sorry, Dafa." Little boss Tang showed an even wider smile and reached out his fat hand. "Show me what you've got there." Su Yang fished out the gold, which he had mashed into a ball, from his pocket and showed it to the man. Little boss Tang weighed it in his hand and checked it for its quality. The gold ball was placed on the table after that. The smile on his face faded as he said in a serious tone, "Brother Su, since young Master Jiang introduced me to you you are one of us. I've roughly checked your gold and it seems okay. However, I must warn you about something first." Su Yang nodded. Little boss Tang said, "All the prices you got from the other gold shops are fake. The price includes the raw materials of gold, the packaging fee, the processing fee, rent, labor, the shop's profit, and taxes, so the price is a lot higher. At Dafa Gold Shop, we only buy gold at its raw material price, which is also the actual value of gold, give or take a 2% processing fee for melting it down. Truth be told, in our line of work, there are other hidden fees, but since you are one of us, I'll exempt all of them just for you." After that, Little Boss Tang fished out an alarm clock-like display with a screen from the drawer and placed it on the table in front of Su Yang. On the display was a set of digitized numbers. 298.65, this is the international price for gold today. 98% of the gold is at 292 renminbi and 67 cents, so I'll round them up to 293 renminbi for you. If you are okay with it, I'll weigh it for you. Su Yang had actually tried to understand the process before, hence he dared not simply step into a random shop because there were a lot of tricks involved. Aside from others, many smaller gold shops would melt the gold right in front of the customer and then weigh it, but because it was done before the customer's eyes, the shop could brazenly keep a tiny bit of melted gold in the hearth and make it look as if a large portion of the gold was lost in the process. Other than the melting fee, the shops might throw in a little cost of depreciation, labor, or whatnot, so the whole process was not transparent. Therefore, Little Boss Tang's terms were actually decent. With that in mind, Su Yang agreed. Little Boss Tang showed his signature smile at Su Yang's decisiveness. His golden teeth blinded Su Yang again. Next, the two of them weighed the gold with the digital scale. The ball of gold weighed a total of 73.2 grams, which equated to a total of 21,447.60 yuan. Little Boss Tang wrote an invoice for Su Yang and told him to pick up the cash at the counter. After the deal, the two of them exchanged WeChat contacts and Little Boss Tang escorted Su Yang out of his office. Outside the office, his fat hand tapped on Su Yang's shoulder. "Brother, you are quick in doing business. Let's hope we can have more opportunities to work together in the future." Nodding, Su Yang then went out to look for the salesperson to get his money. After the salesperson heard Su Yang about to get his money, she was surprised. Did that Pishio one change his mind? Is he spitting out money instead of keeping it? Su Yang tilted his head curiously. Before this, he already sensed that the salesperson treated the owner with a strange attitude. Since he now had the chance to speak with her, he coated his words with sugar and asked, "Hey, pretty lady, what's wrong with your boss? Why did you call him Pishio?" Maybe because of the sugar-coated words, or maybe because Little Boss Tang barely had any power in the shop, the salesperson blurted out without any worries, whispering to Su Yang, "Actually, our boss doesn't really care about the daily operations of the shop. He's always in his office, doing only one thing. Cheating. Cheating." Su Yang was stunned. The salesperson raised her hand and started counting: fate, future, misfortune, fortune, career, marriage, ill omens, that he can read almost everything in the world. Su Yang was surprised by the revelation. Is he also a fortune teller? While the two of them were whispering, a tall lady in a suit and a short skirt coupled with stockings rushed into the shop. As she ran in, she shouted, "Master Tang, Master Tang. Please tell me where my daughter has gone. My daughter is gone. She ran straight into the shop and seemed to be heading to little boss Tang's office. The salesperson pointed at the lady's back. Look, that's a loyal believer of our boss. Su Yang was rendered speechless. That little boss Tang really dressed like a conman. Anyway, he was not bothered by it since he was just there to sell his gold. He handed the salesperson the invoice and got a total of 21,448 yuan from her. Adding old Sixth Lu's 888 yuan compensation, his savings had surpassed 22,000 yuan for the first time. Aside from the others, he could at least afford to cover his daily expenses and his rent for a year. If he could earn more, he might even be able to cover his tuition fee for next year. He had just started to experiment with the point system and he had already made this much money. Su Yang felt hopeful for the future. Maybe this was an opportunity given by the heavens. He must grasp it tightly and change his life. With that in mind, he returned home. He got the cash in hand, and for once in a long time, he ordered takeaway and enjoyed his feast after living so poorly for a while. He ordered a bowl of yellow stewed chicken rice for himself. The spicy soup was mixed into his rice and it allowed Su Yang to fully appreciate the charms of the yellow stewed chicken. After dinner, Su Yang sat at his desk and played some piano music. The strange twig little monster, Gru, was shaking its body along with the music. It was one of Gru's favorite exercises. Whenever it heard music, its black and withered body would turn as soft as a snake's as it danced like waves in the pot. Su Yang could not help but be impressed by how great life had evolved in this case. He was clueless about when the next evolution of life would happen. He searched around his room and ultimately landed his attention on his smartphone. However, he suppressed this thought. His smartphone was too expensive, and if he added the points to it and transformed it into something strange, he would have to spend more money buying a new one. He shelved the thought and decided to review it when he got more money. He continued searching around his room and tried to search for something that life could evolve further. Then he saw the brick on his table. Chapter 10. Special Item. Lucky Disfiguring Brick. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Su Yang had obtained the brick when he first moved to the neighborhood. The moment his eyes had landed on the brick, he felt like he was connected with it, so he brought it home. After that, the brick followed him into several conquests. Wherever Su Yang went, the brick followed. It helped him complete the missions of saving damsels in distress and even brought the evil villains to justice. Actually, all of that was made up in Su Yang's mind. The brick was just a normal brick that he had picked up near a construction site. However, he might be able to add some intellect to the brick, similar to what had happened to the little twig monster, Gru. It was a dead twig, for God's sake. With that in mind, Su Yang made up his mind and added the newly acquired random point to the brick. Based on his previous experience, Su Yang washed his hands with soap carefully in the bathroom. He made sure that his hands were as fragrant as a flower before he went back to his desk to pick the brick up. He opened the point system and a translucent, plus, icon appeared at the top right corner. Praying hard, Su Yang tapped on the icon. Just like every other time, the brick gleamed and the point was added. The brick did not change in terms of appearance. Su Yang felt that it was strange. Did the point adding fail this time? However, even if it did, there should have been some changes, or at least, an explanation should have been provided. Just when he started to wonder, a translucent window appeared above the brick. Brick +1. Special ability acquired. Appraise. A special ability. Another special ability again. Excited, Su Yang pressed, yes. Right away, the description of the brick changed. Lucky Disfiguring Brick, ability. Smash your face with the brick. The harder you smash it, the luckier you will get, limit. Limited to 1 use per month and the luck will only last for 30 minutes. Remark. Come on. Break your head, young man. Su Yang was rendered speechless once more. What the? Is this lousy ability trying to kill me? Even if he smashed his own face, the luck could only last for 30 minutes and it could only be used once per month. This lousy ability could only be treated as a last resort and could not be frequently. With that in mind, Su Yang decided to keep the brick away and only bring it out when he truly needed it. Of course, he would not want to use the brick for the rest of his life. His face was quite valuable after all. After he put the brick away, Su Yang looked at Gru, who was still dancing to the music. The little fellow was really lucky. Su Yang had added points to more than a dozen items and the special effect, Life Evolution, had only appeared once for the dead twig, so its birth on this earth was actually a blessing from the earth itself. Su Yang stretched his body after he was done being sentimental with Gru. He stood up and wanted to wash up, but when he turned around, he saw the bag on the floor. His expression instantly turned heavy. **T, I forgot I still have to copy the lecture notes. He opened his bag and took the straight-a student's notes to have a look, but after a few pages, he felt sleepy and wanted to go to bed. Why don't I start tomorrow since Chu Xia has already bought me another week? No matter how long I have, I still have to copy it on my own. I really don't want to. If only someone could help me. With that in mind, his gaze unintentionally shifted to the waving Gru. His eyes gleamed. Since Gru is a little monster, maybe it can help me copy the notes. Su Yang placed the notes beside Gru and pointed at the words. Gru, do you know how to copy things? The dancing twig stopped moving and a tiny spout stretched out to scratch its head. Gru. Judging from its looks, it could not understand what Su Yang said. However, Su Yang sharply noticed a second of delay in its reaction. With a twist in his thoughts, he tried to bribe the twig. If you help me copy the notes, I'll give you a packet of milk. Gru instantly put its sprout above its head and saluted him. This little twig. I knew it was trying to play dumb. Simple intellect, is its description, huh? The deal was made. Su Yang grabbed a packet of milk from the box under his bed. He cut it open and watered it over Gru's head. Gru. Its two little sprouts were wiggling happily as it joyfully absorbed the milk. Su Yang accidentally discovered Gru's love for taking a milk bath. A little black withered twig was somehow living better than a delicate woman. After the milk bath was over, Gru curled its sprout around Su Yang's pen and flipped the straight-a student's notes open in Su Yang's notebook. The copying process then started. When the pen started to write, its handwriting was exactly like Su Yang's. This little B** starred was really hiding something. The lecture notes were settled and Su Yang happily went to brush his teeth before he threw himself on the bed. The scratching of the ball pen writing on paper sounded like a lullaby as he slowly fell asleep. The next morning when Su Yang woke up, he noticed a stack of notes arranged neatly on his desk. Gru was asleep beside it. He knew it was asleep because whenever the twig was sleeping, it would mumble its name with bubbles coming out of a fish's mouth, Gru. Su Yang picked up the stack of notes and went through it. He originally planned to copy only several pages of that particular class, but he forgot to tell Gru about it. The little fella copied the entire stack in a night. His packet of milk was extremely worth it. Since Gru worked hard for this, Su Yang did not want to procrastinate anymore. He planned to visit old Zhou later today. Even though Chu Xia had pleaded on his behalf, he still had to complete the work on time, especially after Gru did an amazing job. After his breakfast, Su Yang checked his timetable and realized that he had an English class in the morning. Unfortunately, it was Chu Xiaoming's English class. Based on what Chu Xia told him yesterday, the dorky lecturer was asking about him, so it would be better for him to attend the class. However, the class was at 10 a.m., so he was in no hurry. He could see old Joe first before the class. Su-Yang tidied up his things and put the notes in his bag before he headed to campus to meet old Joe as planned. Old Joe was usually in the office of the faculty building. Unlike other lecturers, even if he did not have class in the morning, he would still go to the campus early in the morning and spend time in his office. The girls in class even gossiped about him. They said that old Joe had married his wife through an arranged marriage and that they did not love each other and always argued. The rumor was not entirely groundless either because several students had caught a glimpse of old Joe smoking at the entrance of his apartment before he headed home with a dismal expression as though he was going to meet his end. Standing outside old Joe's office, Su-Yang knocked on the door and old Joe's firm voice came from within. "Come in." Su-Yang opened the door and saw old Joe reading the Shanghai morning newspaper with his glasses on. He greeted the lecturer, "Mr. Zhou." Old Joe lowered his glasses and glanced over at him. "Oh, Su-Yang, come here." Su-Yang walked over. He opened his bag and planned to hand the notes in, but old Joe gestured for him to wait and he started another topic. "I heard about what you've been going through lately." Su-Yang's hand froze in his bag as a big question mark hung over his face. "Excuse me.